All right, so welcome everyone to this Dialogue on Asian University version 6. The topic today is Young Universities in Asia, Perspectives from the Pioneers. As you heard, we have close to 200 people who register, but we don't know when they'll come in. And before I go into the details of the discussion, I want to just give an overview on the format so everybody knows. So the idea is in the beginning, I will give an introduction, say around 5 minutes. Then I would have give each of our two panelists 5 minutes to give some opening remarks. Okay, then we launch into our dialogue, say for about 40 minutes, and I'll ask some questions. And then we open the floor up for a question. In a way, we should have about 30 to 35 minutes for question at the end. And I think the way you can ask your question is in Zoom, you have the Q&A button. You can answer there. We'll try to monitor that and select. Unfortunately, you cannot ask us live. That's all. Okay. So let me give a brief introduction. This Dialogue on Asian University, we're running for almost 3 years now, and this is the 6th version. The organizers are myself, Max, who's online, Professor Ng Chai Tang, President of NUS, and Professor Shih Choon Fong, who is a former Vice President of University of Texas in Dallas. So the 4 of us to do it. Today, I have the privilege to be the moderator, and for a good reason, you see. Now, let me give a brief introduction. We believe this topic I just read out is a very timely topic for DAO. Because the recent economic growth, especially in Asia, has finally allowed countries to invest in higher education, including the creation of many new universities. These ambitious institutions are tasked with critical missions, from training the workforce to nurturing the next generation of leaders, to catalyzing economic growth, and also addressing global challenges. However, achieving this mission is not easy, to say the least. For example, young universities often find it more challenging to attract talents because they are less well-known, to secure a partnership, and also to obtain funding compared to their more established counterparts. So the question really, the big question for us today is how could young universities achieve their potential? So to discuss this topic, we believe no one is more qualified than our two panelists, Professor Shih and Professor Wu. Professor Shih was the founding president of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. It's about 13 years old this year. So certainly one of the young universities and is making a reputation. And Professor Wu was the founding president of Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. This year, I think, is the 31st year, if I remember. It was founded in 1991. So, let me give a brief introduction, personal introduction to the both of them. Let me start with Professor Shih. So Professor Shih is a native of Singapore. He grew up in Singapore. He received his master and PhD degree from Harvard University. After a long journey in the US, a professional career, distinguished career in the US, he returned to National University of Singapore, which after some time he became president of NUS from 2000 to 2008. And then he became the founding president of KAUST. So this is the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology, and he served from 2008 to 2013. He is among the world's highly cited researchers. He's won many medals and awards. In particular, he has honorary doctorate degrees from Brown University in the US, Waseda University in Japan, and Loughborough University in the UK. He is a member of the US National Academy of Engineering. So Professor Wu is a native, was born in Shanghai, but grew up in Hong Kong. He received his bachelor degree in physics and mathematics from Georgetown College in the US, and his master and PhD degree in physics at Washington University, also in the US. After a postdoctoral study at UCSD, San Diego. He then took up a professorial position at the Northwestern University, where he stayed for a long time, ultimately becoming chair of the Department of Physics and Astronomy. Then after that, he was appointed as provost at the University of California, San Diego. And then in 1983, at the young age of 45, he became president of San Francisco State University. And he was the first ethnic Chinese to head a major university in the US. He has also won many honors and awards. I won't go through that. He has honorary doctorates from Washington University, Georgetown College, HKUST, and so on and so forth. I have to mention one thing. Don't blush, Chia-Wei. So the city of San Francisco named a day called Chia-Wei Wu Day, the mayor of San Francisco. I don't know which day. Maybe you can comment on that. So very few universities. Huh?
I think they forgot it already.
Yeah, but okay, but it was named. But very few university presidents can say that, put it on their resume. But anyway, my short introduction probably does not do justice to your very illustrious career. So, but let me launch into the second part of the program, which is I will ask Professor Wu to start first, to give his 5 minutes opening remark, and then I'll ask Professor Shih to do that before we launch into the dialogue. So Chia-Wei, please.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Tony. Now, before Professor Shih delves into a formal and beautiful speech, and before our interactive program, please let me look at what we mean by higher educational institutions, not just universities. Because different places, different times, different educational institutions are required to meet the needs of different constituents. As an example, I will lightly take you with me on a fun trip and tell you the different places, times, and different kinds of institutions that I have experienced. At the age of 17, not able to speak a single complete sentence in English, and with very little money, really very little money, I traveled from Hong Kong to San Francisco on a steamship. Took some 18 days. There were 60 students in a cabin, sleeping on rows of 3-tiered bunk beds. Stayed for 2 weeks in a YMCA hostel in San Francisco, Chinatown at $3.25 a day. Could only afford to eat plain white bread for every meal and wait to get a train ride to my destination in Kentucky. Could not have imagined that 20 years later, I would be back in San Francisco, this cultural, international, and charming city's only comprehensive university, to run that university. Now, this constitutes one kind of higher education institution. The train took 3 full days to reach Chicago. Could not have imagined that 13 years later, I would be back in Chicago, this major industrial city, to run its, to teach in one of its 2 research universities, and 5 years later to run its physics department. That was a second kind of institution. Private, very different institution. Another train ride now took me to Cincinnati, crossing the Ohio River, known as the Mason-Dixie line, to go into a southern state to attend a small college with only 800 students in a town of just 3,000 people. That was a third kind of institution. Well, maybe you would allow me to sidetrack for a minute. Quite an education. It was a strange place with a strange time for a 17-year-old to witness lots of life's contradictions. It's a state that promoted Christian values, but practiced racial prejudice and strict segregation. Against alcoholic drinks, but well known for its whiskey. Against smoking, but well known for its tobacco. Against gambling, but well known for its horse race betting in Louisville. That was my off-campus college education. After just 1 year of undergraduate study, just 1 year, I went to St. Louis, a historical city that had lost its glory and splendor, for my totally unprepared PhD study at, I just lost touch. Oh, sorry.
You're on.
I'm on. Okay. Okay, sorry. I went to St. Louis, a historical city that had lost its glory and splendor, for my totally unprepared PhD study after just 1 year of undergraduate work at a major research university. As you can see, as you can imagine, it was a most painful struggle. But this, a fourth kind of institution. Then it was on to San Diego, California, indeed to La Jolla, known as paradise on earth, to pursue postdoctoral work at a newly established but already great research university. Could not have imagined that 11 years later, I would be back in San Diego as provost and professor. The university was long considered a miracle by the international academic community. It was a sixth kind of institution, higher education institution. Well, after that, it was back to San Francisco and then back to Hong Kong, completing a full cycle with a group of very dedicated and talented colleagues to found yet a sixth kind of institution. Just to sum up these experiences, one little known small liberal arts college in a minute town, 4 world-class research universities in major metropolises, 1 major university known for its history of strong teaching and for controversial political activities. And in addition, I was actively involved with a large number of Chinese universities and colleges. Well, you might say, seen it all. Well, yes, good materials for an old man to compare different kinds of higher education institutions, and no lack of interesting, fun stories to tell my grandchildren. Thank you.
Very good. Very interesting life story. Okay, Professor Shih Choon Fong, I just call you. Your turn. Your 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, so in 1990, okay, have the first slide, please. In 1996, I made my way, as I made it, a long trip to the west, to North America. In 1997, after spending 30 years in North America, 20 in academia and 10 in industry, I returned to my native home, Singapore and NUS. Some said I was parachuted into NUS. Be that as it may, I spent the next 12 years primarily in university management or administration. Since NUS is a centenarian, and the theme of this webinar is young universities in Asia, I'll talk about 2 young universities launched in the 21st century. But before I speak about these adolescent universities, I'd like to share an observation from my years in the West and some in the East, a vision of a 21st century university. Beyond its core mission of research and education, universities should embrace innovation and entrepreneurship. So with these remarks, let me now talk about a king's dream and vision and what drew me to Saudi Arabia. So on this slide, you see the king's dream. Now, this is what King Abdullah said: a university that will rekindle the great traditions of great traditions of scholarship and service, emphasize scholarship and service, with a spirit that seeks knowledge, not only for its own sake, but also for the larger purpose of serving humanity. This is truly an inspiring vision, and I was moved. I left for Saudi Arabia. Then, of course, I said, to the king, the best assurance of fulfilling your dream resides with the talented and dedicated individuals that we will recruit to your university by the Red Sea. So let me talk to the next slide. And what we did in keeping with King Abdullah's dream of a university that seeks also to contribute to humanity. So building on the king's dream, on day one, KAUST has an economic and technology development division. This is a major division. And the mission of the vision of this division is to build on KAUST's quest for excellence in research and education, and to seek to contribute significantly to the development of a knowledge and innovation-driven sector for the kingdom's economy and beyond. Okay, with this words now, let me move to a different country, my next trip, to China. Now, I'll talk about the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. It is almost 70 or 80-year-old institution, but it also transformed itself. In 2014, the university launched a research-oriented undergraduate program dedicated to science and engineering. And this is the vision of CAS President Chun Bai. He said, the aim of education is for students to break through orthodox understanding, to innovate with imagination and courage, and have a profound impact on the country's future and people's well-being. And of course, with that vision, we started two distinctive overseas studies programs. 2017, the undergraduate study abroad program. 2018, the overseas graduate studies fellowship program. The next slide, please. So these are some of the best and brightest young people in China. They exude energy, enthusiasm, optimism, and they are so eager to learn and to discover and to join, to go into a new culture, a new society, and learn from them. So here is the undergraduate studies abroad program. 50% of the undergraduates are eligible for study abroad program up for a full 6 months or even longer at the partner universities listed here. Then this other one, the Overseas Graduate Studies Fellowship. The top 20% of the graduates are eligible for an Overseas Graduate Fellowship at some of the partner universities listed on the slide. But you know, the students are so bright, so good, that practically every one of them receive full 4 to 5 year scholarship or fellowship for studies in science and engineering at the universities this year. So this is a kind of talent, young talent, enthusiastic, ambitious talent in China. So now let me move on. So now I come to topic. We're talking about young people, not just interested in research and education, but also with the entrepreneurial spirit, the spirit to explore, to discover. So now I'll talk about the pioneers of innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. NUS is an old university, centenarian, but in 2001, NUS Enterprise was established. 20 years later, the national TV offered a special hour-long TV program. NUS, a startup university. So you see, even a centenarian can turn into a startup university. So universities are certainly a dynamic enterprise. Now let me come to UKAUST. Here's a picture of third-year UKAUST undergraduate students spending some time at Google. They hope someday they too will form their own Google. If not, join a company like Google. They have entrepreneurial aspirations. Now to KAUST. 10 years after the formation of KAUST, KAUST celebrated a decade of discovery, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And now this brings me to my final slide. I want to talk about a virtuous cycle of research and education, innovation and entrepreneurship, because this is King Abdullah's dream. And it's also, in many ways, my vision for the universities I've been involved with. 3 of them so far. Universities at the leading edge of innovation and entrepreneurship are presenting societies with the fruits of research and education, and hence realizing the virtuous cycle. My 5 decades journey has deepened my understanding that the virtuous cycle enriches the university, and more importantly, ensures its continuing relevance in the 21st century. So thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts.
Thank you.
One.
Thank you, Choon Fong. If I can pause here, I was listening intensely to both your opening remarks. From Chia-Wei, I learned that, first of all, there's a personal journey for all of us individually, starting from this poor beginning in the US, in San Francisco, going through all the institutions. So nobody, people in the audience are listening, right? You don't know, wherever you are, whatever stage of your career, you may become a university president or whatever you want to achieve. The goal is very achievable. I think from Choon Fong, I learned, right, that a vision of an institution is very, very important. That is what often attracts people to the place, and you remember that. And of course, recruiting talent is also very important. I mean, those are things, we'll explore some of those topics when we launch into the dialogue. So we have hopefully about 35 to 40 minutes to launch into our dialogue. So I have I have sort of 4 questions in mind, but I will try to review them as I go, okay? And so I will start with Chia-Wei first, okay? Now, the first question is really about how, it's the same question, by the way, the same questions to both panelists. The question is, how did you personally get involved in building the university that you were, as in this case, HKUST, and also KAUST? Let me talk about those 2, okay? But feel free to talk about the other ones. How were you approached? It didn't just happen, right? What was your thinking when you were approached? Why did you decide to accept the job? Now, let me give a personal anecdote. So with Chia-Wei, okay?
Okay.
When Chia-Wei was appointed as the president of San Francisco State University, I think all Chinese American, especially in the US, we all knew that. I mean, I never met Chia-Wei at that point. As I said earlier, he was the first ethnic Chinese to become president of a major US university. So then later on, I remember that I first met you during your recruitment trips. I was a faculty member at UCLA, and you were flying around the world to recruit people. Must be like late 1980s or early 1990 or something like that. And you had set up a room in the Los Angeles International Airport to meet potential candidates. You didn't have time to even get off the airport. So I remember I went to the airport to meet you. I think that was the first time. So I don't know whether you remember. Now, okay, yes. That's one story. So that's probably, I don't know, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago when we met.
About, yeah.
The second one is related to my question. So there's a very famous photograph on display at HKUST, like in the library. And that's a photograph of the planning committee of HKUST. And you were in it, but I don't think you were in it as president. You were in it as one of the planning committee. So maybe that's a good segue for you to talk about the beginning. How were you involved? How did you get involved? What were you thinking? Please, Chia-Wei.
Well, I sort of stumbled into administration too early in life. In fact, one of my former University of California system-wide presidents, Dick Atkinson, by the way, Dick Atkinson was the one that led the US delegation to China after Nixon's visit to to talk to Vice Premier Fang Yi about US-China exchange. Anyway, he asked me that we had long after both of us retired, we had a long 2-hour breakfast. And he said, how old were you when you went to San Francisco? I said, 45. He said, no, that was wrong. If you had waited 2 years, I said, why? He said, you made a wrong a career decision. If you waited 2 years, Berkeley would have been yours. I said no. I said no, because I knew the chairman at that time.
Do we lose something? I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, you're frozen, Chia-Wei.
Chia-Wei, you're frozen. Oh. Can Max help?
Tony, why don't you get the discussion going with Choon Fong?
Yeah.
Chia-Wei.
So, okay, let's give 5 more seconds for Chia-Wei to come back, because this happens with Zoom from time to time. So Chia-Wei, if you can hear us, maybe you can log off and log back in. Max, would that be
Yeah, I
okay?
think
And I'll start with Choon Fong. Is that okay, Max? Okay, so Choon Fong, okay, same question.
Okay.
But let me recall,
how did I
okay,
get
let me
into
recall
this
when
business?
you and I met.
Yeah.
It must be also in the 90s when you,
Yeah.
I met you in
Well, National Science, you were the director of the mathematics division.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
president. You recall that?
I visited you in your office, but you were not president yet. I think maybe you were vice president.
Vice
or something.
president.
Vice president. So
Yeah, vice
I heard about your reputation.
Yeah.
Your field, applied mechanics, is somewhat overlap with my own interest. So we knew
that's
some
right,
people in
that's
common.
right.
So I visited you.
So we have a couple of things in common, and I visited
Yeah, and then-
NSF quite regularly. I tell you how I got involved. I
Yeah,
was
please.
a very happy researcher at Brown. It's a Ivy League, very comfortable life, just research and a little bit of consulting. But I felt my homeland, native country, Singapore, and I should visit. And in the early 90s, I came back to Singapore, partly to visit, see my aging parents, and to see what's going on in the university sector. And then one reason or another, I met some of the Singapore government leadership, and they start interviewing me and say, would you like to come to Singapore and do something here in the university? I said, no, I'm interested in research and blah, blah, blah. And they said, okay. So I got an opportunity to be the founding director of a new material research institute called the Institute for Materials Research and Engineering. And just a few days ago, it celebrated its 25th anniversary. And I was brought here, my wife and I, by them to, share the history of IMRI. So going to NUS was sort of an accident, While I was visiting NUS and so forth, someone in the government says, I would like you to consider university. And before I knew it, in Singapore system, if the government tells you you should be in the university, then you go to the university. So that's how I found out I was in the university. Anyway, I've always, unlike many academics, I had 10 years in the private sector. So I was always while I believe in basic research, I also believe that research should also, and education, should impart value to society. How would that do it? Because in a corporation, it is, how does your research create value for the company? So that was always one. So I had two views. I think they're complementary. Anyway, the government likes that. So I was in NUS. So I started the NUS Enterprise and Entrepreneurial Arm. And today is one of the most successful entrepreneurial ecosystem in Singapore. By the way, by this year, more than 30% of the startup funding entrepreneurs are coming from NUS alone for all of Singapore.
I'm on now, right?
Yeah, but Chia-Wei, welcome back. But Choon Fong is in the middle now, so let him finish. I'll come back to you.
Okay.
So I was doing that, and that somehow the entrepreneurial dimension of KAUST excited Ali Naimi, who was then the Minister of Petroleum. And I was at the time now advisor to a couple of universities in Saudi Arabia. So he invited me to join the advisory board for KAUST, advisory committee for KAUST, and we were planning and so forth. So one day, I think you know the story, I missed one meeting of the advisory committee. And the next thing I knew was I got a call and says, we decided that you should be the founding president of King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. I said, I can't do that. I have a commitment to Singapore and I will check with my minister, my boss. He said, don't worry, I talked to him already. He says, okay. He had connected to talk. So before I knew it, I was there. I was brought to KAUST. So but I spent 2 years before that, working on KAUST and strategizing things. But the interesting thing is, my American friends were very skeptical. And they said to me, Choon Fong, okay, years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you made your way to a cultural desert. They wouldn't allow you chewing gums. Now you're making your way to a real desert, and you can't even have your favorite wine. I said, these are not important. The important thing is how, as an academic, as an educator, we can contribute to our students and to the larger society. Can we make a difference? I was inspired by the King's Dream. I think I shared with you. And I think this is something that I will always remember. He said, research and education university is about scholarship, the research, and service. Scholarship, and he didn't say scholarship, he said scholarship and service. The scholarship meant, research, because in those days it's called scholarship. And he also said, academia should be imbued with a spirit that seeks knowledge not only for its own sake, but for the larger purpose of serving humanity. What an inspiring, visionary concept. This is what drew me to Saudi Arabia. And then many of the colleagues, Tony should know, were drawn to Saudi Arabia by that vision, even though it's a country we knew little, totally different culture, and some say frozen in time. It's not true now, you know that. But those are the sort of a stereotype that many people in the West holds about the Middle East, and particularly Saudi Arabia. I think I will assure you.
So, for one last question, had you visited Saudi Arabia before the KAUST connection?
Yes, I was there for 2 years, so I knew the country. I was advisor to, I think, a university called in the East, several universities, and I was serving on the advisory committee for the formation of KAUST, because the advisory committee started in 2006 on the King's, and it was chaired by the Minister of Oil. Well, probably they say the second most powerful man in the kingdom. So we had a lot of meetings. So I was exposed, but I was not ready, because I said, this is too big a jump. I mean, I knew nothing of the culture, and this, I mean, okay. And its history and so forth. But I was persuaded that this is an enterprise that I should be part of.
Very good. Okay. So we'll come back to you, Choon Fong. Okay, Chia-Wei, you can pick up where you left off.
I don't remember where I left off, but we better give you very short answers, because you had prepared lots of good questions, and also we should have a lot more interactive program.
No, this is about how you remember I said you were on the planning committee. So
well,
how did you hear about this? What were you thinking? How did you accept?
The reason I was put on the planning committee was that Hong Kong has not seen before a science and technology research university, and so government decided, at that time it was still the British government, they decided that there should be 5 university presidents from overseas. So of course 4 of them were from the British Commonwealth, or you might say that, in fact, one was the chairman of the university vice chancellors in UK. One was like that, a person in Australia, and then anyway, after the 4, they want somebody who is of Chinese descent, and there was only one. So I got on the planning committee, and so I was going to Hong Kong 2-3 times a year to join the planning committee. Then there was one time I arrived at the hotel from the airport, and I like to travel in blue jeans or white jeans, and very, very casual. And I was told that, hey, come to the planning committee right away. I said, we're not supposed to meet until this afternoon. They said, no, come anyway. So I went there and I saw all the members sitting in a semicircle, and with me in the middle. It's like a public trial. And turned out they interviewed me for the job. To say why I wound up there, my primary and secondary education was all in Chinese. So I have a very deep-rooted Chinese cultural background, you might say. While in the US, even though I went there when I was 17, in 1970s, early 70s, after Nixon went to China, yeah, lots of Chinese Americans, or ethnic Chinese there, mostly, almost all of them from Taiwan, with some from Hong Kong. We were involved in Chinese student movements, and there was this offshore islands movement known as 钓鱼台运动. And we were involved in that. And after that, there were scholars coming from China. We were involved in receiving them, taking care of them. So all of this involvement, and then in the late 70s, I went to China more than once, and one time was there for 4 months in 1978, to start the visiting scholar program. I worked with Vice President Fang Yi on that, and so all of that involvement with China and with my hometown in Shanghai and Hong Kong. So when the offer was made to me, I didn't think that I was necessarily like Vice Minister to go. And so I talked with my wife. My wife said that, well, if you don't go, would you regret it 20 years later? I said, yes, but then I have to worry about my family, because that was late 1980s, right? And remember that in 1989, there was events in Beijing, and some years later, in 1997, Hong Kong was to return to the mother country, and lots of Hong Kong people, after 1.5 centuries of colonialism, were very afraid, and then many professors actually were leaving. And well, so we would have to go against the current, you might say. So I said, yes, I think I would like to take on the job, but don't forget that something may go wrong in Hong Kong for all we know. And she said, no problem. If that happens, we'll just go back to our poor student days. We were students when we got married, very, very young. And living in a 1 or 2 room apartment, that was all right. So she said, would you regret if you didn't go 20 years from now? I said, most likely. She said, okay, then go.
Well, it's very interesting. So I see with you and Choon Fong, you share some similarity. You were both on the planning committees. That's one. Second is, I think Choon Fong, you were going to unexplored territory in some sense, even though you've been there, but you were captivated by the vision. And so you want to do something. Chia-Wei, in a way, you were coming home in some sense, right? To
after
Hong
33,
Kong.
after 33.
Yeah. That's right. But in a way, I can sense that both of you sort of took the plunge without sort of being too analytical about it. You know what I mean? You sort of, it's your heart rather than your brain, rather than your brain. Well, your brain too, you use it there.
Oh, well, thank you.
But I think that is, yeah, I guess in life that often happens. I mean, I always tell people, there's no equivalent of the MBA for university president. No. So we get a PhD and we go into academic, do research and have students and so on. But we all have our own individual journey into administration, and so it's not like a set path. Okay, so let me launch
More importantly, it's not just a president. You have to have a good team. You have to have people who have knowledge, who have experience, and heart, as you said, heart, especially for Hong Kong at that time. Tony, you remember that, right? Yeah, our founding faculty members were really full of heart. While others were leaving, we were coming.
Well, I was told when I went to HKUST that in your days, Chia-Wei, at 10 p.m. at night, all the lights in the laboratories were on. 12 a.m. 12 a.m. Sorry. So these were like a startup, right? You hear about startups in Silicon Valley. People don't sleep. Well, that's what it is. People were on a mission. I think it was probably at KAUST too. Choon Fong.
If I add a word, Tony, if I add a word.
Yeah, please.
When I decided, I made my decision to go to KAUST, my wife supported me. Most of my friends in Singapore and some in high places, especially Americans, say, you are making a big mistake. There's no turning back. Once you go there, you're more or less, your career is over or whatever it is. But but I tell you, life is not so simple as that, that you can do a logical deduction, but there's so much stereotype of the Middle East.
That's what I mean. Not analytical.
I think
not too
that we should
analytical.
be very open. They have a great civilization, because civilizations go up and down and up, and I think they may be coming back, just as China's coming back. So I think we have to have more open minds. And the other thing I want to say is, for those aspiring for university leadership, nothing in our training of research and seeking funding and building research program ever prepare us to be university leaders, to be vice president or president. Nothing. You're right, no MBA. So there's a lot. It will be a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
But nevertheless,
the most important thing is to have really a team.
a team ability. Yes.
Right? Have a team, because anything that you want to do, even a small success, depends on a really united team.
Yeah, a
To destroy
united team.
one person enough, whether it's a university or a corporation or a government.
Okay,
Maybe-
very good.
okay.
This is a good segue to my second question for discussion, which is what was the most challenging matter that you faced when building your new university? Was it recruiting people, or raising funds, or building the physical campus, or dealing with the politics with the various stakeholders? You know, team is one. You had to deal with the government, or the king, and the international community. So there must be a lot of challenges. So can you share with us a little bit of that? Who wants to take it up first? Chia-Wei, you want to take it up?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay.
Well, building the campus was a problem because we were given a slope, you might say, with nothing on it, and no power, no water, literally nothing. And we were given 7 years to build it, but then Sir S.Y. Chung could not wait. He was the chairman of the University Council, and the government could not wait, so it was cut to 3 years. But that is physical. That's not as an important difficulty. To me, the biggest difficulty was the British 3-year system, 3 years undergraduate, and so the students are very focused. So there is no breath to be taught. Now, it probably worked well in UK, because in UK, the public secondary schools, so-called public means private, right? They were elitists. The students in those secondary schools in UK was very broadly educated already. So when they go to college, undergraduate, they could really focus on their specialty. But in Hong Kong, Tony, you know that too. You grew up in Hong Kong. The secondary education was not broad-based, not liberal arts, not at all. So when you go to college, if you don't have that a chance to become broadened, then you become very narrow. And however, that was a system, and there was a difficulty. And also, there were 2 older universities already, and the governments, for everything, we were conformed to whatever that's given to those 2 older universities. So for a new research university, especially in science and technology, you cannot conform to all the written formulas. And that, unfortunately, we didn't have any choice. There were people who said that, but you were given so much money compared to the 2 other universities all at once. I said, yes, because we were built all at once. Hong Kong U was at that time 70 years old, and Chinese University was 30-some years old, and we were given 3 years to open. So lots and lots of equipment and things, the expenditure that's needed, that they got spread over the years, had to be crunched together. So it's not surprising, but we had to be prepared with that.
Can I jump in and ask you?
One more thing.
Ask you a question. Finish.
We were not allowed to take more than 4% of non-Hong Kong students, because the other 2 universities had the same problem.
That has changed later
It's a
on.
restriction. Only 4%. So how can we be an international research university on science and technology when you were so limited? Those were the difficulties.
Yeah. Let me ask you a maybe politically sensitive question. Okay. So when HKUST was founded, you said there were 2 existing universities, right? Much older. So did you feel a sense of envy or jealousy or little turf issues? I'm serious. I mean, now it's long past, right? You can talk about it freely. Did you get cooperation from our sister universities?
I would not say cooperation. And it's a small minority who were not happy and probably criticize or attack us or found faults with us. But I think that what probably hurt the most was that some of them senior people were afraid that we might steal faculty members, professors from them. It turned out that we didn't steal particularly any of them. And that, of course, I guess made some of them even more angry.
So Choon Fong, I think that's a good segue to pass on to you. Recruiting people gotta be one of the most important.
Yes, it is.
Okay, can you talk about that and other things?
Before I say, the building was easy because Aramco, I can tell you, it is probably the most efficient organization in the world. I will tell you guys, it's a world-class, because I've worked with NASA, GE, I know the ExxonMobil people. I tell you, this is a world-class organization. So they are really powerful institutions in the Middle East. Don't be deceived by Sarah. Anyway, they took care of the building, or the infrastructure, but I did give some advice on how I like to do things. We did the academic structure, organization. They also provided the funding. So infrastructure, physical infrastructure, funding was not here. Recruitment, yes. Because you see, many of the people want to recruit, well, at least many came from the West. They do have a certain view of the military. So we are starting from a bad playing field. I have to go and come. So you go to the US, you know David Keyes. I first meet them and their wife, lunch and dinner, run through the King's Dream. So this is the King's Dream. Do you believe in this? I persuade. I brought documents of King's Dream and so forth. Recruitment is the most difficult. But beyond recruiting talent, you want to recruit talent who have empathy or who really align with the King's vision. I'm just there to do research. Why do I care about doing something that will have impact to the kingdom? Because the last thing I want, or the king wants, and including me and some of the leadership, is that we be a scientific oasis, a sort of a bubble, and we have to engage the community. We have to bring benefits to the community. And this is important. And we could interact with the high school students and bring them to KAUST. So we want people who believe in engaging the South, the larger Saudi society, besides just talking to themselves and publishing papers and so forth. So this is tough. Recruiting committed, talented, dedicated people, and bring them alignment. The most difficult thing was, of course, recruiting the leadership team. Because as Chia-Wei pointed out, the president can only do so much, especially in a new enterprise like KAUST. Huge challenge. I mean, okay, I would call it a lifetime of challenges and experience. I would get enough. The 5 years could fill 20 years of my life. Anyway, but it was worthwhile adventure because we did a lot, because we were a fantastic team. Alignment, not just a team, but sharing a common purpose.
Alignment with the question for Choon Fong. I remember that in 2008 at the Olympics in Beijing, and we were at the opening ceremony where you
we met.
And I said, what is the mission of your university? I said, for HKUST, we were a group of people who were overseas for many years. We would like to come back to our mother country and make contributions, and also to bring together countries on the two sides of the Pacific Ocean, right? To bring them together, because U.S.-China relations are so important, even in those days. And I said, wouldn't you have a great opportunity to bring together the Arabic world with the Western world, the Muslim world with the Christian world? Would that be a mission? I remember asking you that.
Yes.
What did you say?
I can see from your question, you are an enlightened scholar and administrator. You are enlightened. Many of my friends don't feel that way, especially my American friends, Western friends. But sad to say, I say this is what the king said, and I believe in that dream. I believe in that vision, that the world that science, technology, education must be and open enterprise. We have to bring all around to network, to understand each other, and it will promote mutual understanding and goodwill, and the world will be better off when universities are open to the world, where we mix internationals and domestic students and so forth. So I do not believe that a university should be totally domestic students. There should be a good balance, because after all, it's exposing young people to other cultures, to other ways of thinking. Yeah. So
I can
we were
see
limited
that,
to just 4%. Tony, by the time you took over the university,
it's 20% or something.
yeah, increased by
20%. Yeah.
But
Anyway,
for graduate school, there was no limit, right?
That's right. That's right. Well, that's
Because
kind of a political limit. Okay.
Yeah, but because if you have limit on the numbers on PhD students, then the university would have hardly any.
Yeah.
Almost all of them are from the mainland China and from Europe and America.
But no, I just want to maybe as a conclusion to this part, I can tell from both of you, you still feel very passionate about this project. And it seems that the key is not the hardware. It's not even the money. You know, those are necessary but not sufficient. Okay, let me put it that way. The key is people, talent. Okay, so Chia-Wei, I remember. So there's a legend in HKUST that it's a quote that attributed to you. What is it? First class people brings first class people, but second class people will bring third class people. I don't know whether you own that quote. Okay, and
yes.
I think people, believe it.
And third class people would bring people without class.
Okay. Okay.
Well,
So
the reason why second-class people bring third-class people was that they would be afraid of competition.
That's right. That's right. So Choon Fong, you should be happy to know that many of the people you recruited in the early days, the founders, they were still here, many of them. So I think that's the key. That you need new blood, but you need also stability.
Yeah. I want to thank you for inviting me to KAUST to spend a week in December 2019. I met them over. They still remain so enthusiastic, so positive about KAUST. I think KAUST, is doing extremely well. I'm just so excited about KAUST, and I think
we have about 10 more minutes or so for our session. I have two more questions.
In our case, the founding members are just beginning to retire one by one, and a new retired professors association has been formed with 30 founding members and probably 100 joining, and every year there'll be new ones coming. And this group, I hope, would be contributing a lot to not just UST but also to lots of universities.
Yes, definitely, very good. Okay, all right. We have about 10 minutes. I still have sort of two more general questions. So the third one is really quite simple. If you were to do it again, it's founded university, what would you change in your approach and how you did it? So maybe Choon Fong, maybe start with you. Okay. It's more recent memory.
Yeah. All right. For KAUST is very special. The infrastructure, the physical infrastructure and the money was not an issue. So this is a very special case. If I were to start again, you know what I'll do? I'll put an overseas office in North America, in Europe, and in Asia for recruitment, faculty and students, but they are the university, as you say. They will make the universities great. Whatever happens, it's really the community of dedicated talents. So I'll make that first priority, and it's very difficult. And I think we could get booklets explain the vision, and then also talk about a mission that's in alignment. I think recruitment has always been, and I echo exactly Chia-Wei says. We got to get the good people. You got to get first-class people. The moment you see, the founding members, especially for new universities, the founding members, they are the people who do the recruitment. As president, you and I, we recruit the first 10, 20, 30 people. But the next 100, 200 will be done by faculty committees. Now, if you have, so to speak, second-class people, you're right. You're going to end up with a third-class faculty. Now, I tell you, it's easy to go downhill. It's very hard to climb uphill. So try to, get the very best at the beginning, and people who are in alignment with the vision and mission, because it's very clear, the clarity of what is the vision and mission of this university.
Yes.
Okay,
And
Chia-Wei.
clarity will also
Now,
attract.
what would I do differently?
Yeah, that's
First
right.
of all, I would fight for a 4-year system. At that time, in UK, the Cambridge and Oxford just added a foundation year, basically making it a 4 years.
So Hong Kong changed to 4 years, right? After you left.
Oh, long after.
Yeah.
Long after. And University of Hong Kong, the vice chancellor there at that time, Wang Gengwu, Singaporean, it was also pushing for a foundation year, in a way, going to a 4-year system in a roundabout way. But what was really strange was the Chinese University of Hong Kong, which was always running a 4-year system. The president, Charles Gao, went the other way, gave up to the government and changed from 4 years to a 3-year system, while the faculty and students all protested. You know, we were planning, we didn't have much room to make hay. But if at that time Chinese U did not go the other way, I would have fought along with Hong Kong U and China to insist on a 4-year undergraduate, with all 3 universities going arguing the same way the government may yield. I would also fight for a real school of humanities and social sciences. We were allowed only 3 schools: science, engineering, and business. And I said, how can you have a university where the mind is not stretched when people are not broadly educated? We had to have a school of humanity and social sciences. After a long fight, I got one, however, very limited. Only graduate students are allowed, and no undergraduates were allowed. But at least I got them on equal basis. For instance, it may be even smaller than the electronic engineering department, but the deans were on the same salary level. Everybody was the same. Yeah. But I would like to have a much stronger, larger school of humanities.
So Chia-Wei,
and the last thing is that I would like to really strengthen the liberal arts undergraduate education. I must say that we, including my successor, including you, Tony, we probably could have done a lot more with the undergraduate, especially 4-year system, liberal arts education.
Mm-hmm. So I want to have a comment on both of your comment on this section. So Chia-Wei, you know, my thinking was exactly this. You know, for undergrad, you got to have a broadening experience, you know, especially because we are a tech school, right? So one of the things, you know, that we, when I was there, I said we should build a performing arts center. So we have one. It's called the Shaw Auditorium, by name after Sir Run Shaw, and it's inaugurated last November. I think it's, in my mind, it's precisely because we are UST that we need such a thing. You know, I think so. Okay, so I think that's a small step in that direction. You know, Choon Fong, you know, because I went through the same mindset, you know, you had when you go there. How would you do it differently? Well, it's not a static world. You know, the Saudi Arabia has changed so much, even in the last 5 years. So you could not, you know, whatever you changed 10 years before, we're not. I mean, now is much more.
Okay.
Yeah, because in fact now, I always say, you know, Saudi Arabia until last decade was like a mysterious kingdom.
Yes.
You know, like China, right? You know, you think about China 30, 40 years ago, very few people, foreigner had visited. It's like a mystery. But now all of a sudden it opened up, and it really the university is part of society, has to change with the culture in the country. Anyway, that I think is a very, very interesting part of the experience of leading a university. Let me come to the last question. It's very simple. What advice would you give to others who may be in the same position with the responsibility to build or are building new university in Asia, especially? Given the current position of Asia, right, in the rest of the world, both politically and economically, how, as I said, society changed. What advice would you give them? And there are lots. I know, for example, in Japan has a new UST in Okinawa. India has more than double its IITs, for example. In the Middle East has many new universities, not just in Saudi Arabia. So everybody's starting. All these are within the last decade or so, give or take. Okay. So what advice would you give them? Okay, what to do and what not to do? So Chia-Wei, maybe I'll start with you.
Well, as I said earlier, the first thing is that you need to know when, where, and whom, for whom the mission and objectives, right? Because every country is different, every city is different, every community is different. You need to know this university that you are building. It's for whom? And where it's located, what is the timeline at that time. And therefore you determine on which type of institution. A research university, a teaching university, a liberal arts college. This is why at the very beginning, when I was talking about going around the experiences, there are different kinds of universities and colleges, and all of them are important, at least 6 or 7 kinds. And when I first went to Hong Kong, there were 5 different kinds. And it's a very good continuous spectrum. Later, for a reason unknown to me, they were all put on some sort of uniform basis. And I guess I
agree with your observation.
Yeah.
Probably not what would you would recommend. So that's what not to do.
Well, once you decide that exactly what type of institution, then you really need good planning. Now, what concerns me these days is that there are new universities, lots of new universities being built in China. I don't know about other countries very well, but in China, it seems that often a local government leader would say, "Hey, we got land," and then some rich folk and very rich people now are encouraged by central government to donate for good causes, and of course, higher education is a good cause. So people came up with billions of dollars for a new university. Then we find a good founding president. It's as if everything is then set. Well, land is important. Money is important. A president is important if he or she also have a good team. But then it comes step by step. You've got to have, once you know your mission, your objective, you have to do academic planning. 学术规划. You have to plan it out. And with that, you decide how to recruit faculty and staff. So the staff establishment, 人员编制. And depending on who's coming, you design the campus. I remember at that time when we first got started, it was not enough for the government to allow the Jockey Club, which was Hong Kong, was a charitable organization, to come up with money, with government money also, to just build. But we had to know how to design it. Then, for instance, we were going to microelectronics, and you need very clean labs. You need labs without vibration problems. So you have to go all this insulated and go all the way down to the bedrock, right? So all these things are part of the campus design. It's not just beautiful buildings and a lake in the middle. All that is important, but still you have to have the design right. And then you have to have financial budgeting and monitoring. So it's step by step. And so this is how one plan and build a university, not just suddenly jump into it because there's land, there's money, and they found one good leader. Yeah. And also, don't pay any attention to the ranking.
Choon Fong, you want to add to this? What advice would you give?
Okay, I tell you what, I think when we start out, the benefactor, the government will always have a vision. I think we must have vision clarity and the mission alignment with vision. The biggest problem I see is, I will use 2 words: mission drift and mission creep. When that happens, what is the original intent? To be best in your class, whether it's a teaching university, whether it's a research university, whether it's a university in science and tech, driven to be, I want to be everything. And when you want to be everything, you're going to be a mediocre. And I think this mission drift and mission creep is I see so common, because everybody wants to be like the other guy, Right. I think one thing good about the American system is they believe in diversity. The universities in the South, in Houston, whatever, have their own strength. The Northeast have their own strength. The West, the Berkeley and the Stanford, they have great entrepreneurial ecosystems. They each pride in their own strengths and their own comparative advantages. I think university presidents need to have the confidence in themselves and their team, and to make sure that university's agenda the mission is in alignment with the original vision. And the other thing I want to say is nation universities, the impact of the university to local society is important. Unlike the Western culture, which has a long-term view, a university has to look, at least in Asian context. Now, it's not true of everyone, but both in the near term and the long view of what the university can accomplish. Because while you have a long view of what the university should accomplish, but you don't meet some near-term objectives, the university can throw, especially in terms of what the government, has in mind for that university. So I think understanding, the benefactors or whoever is the provider of funds, understanding the vision and staying with that vision and avoiding mission creep and drift, which my experience is always bring good intentions, good starting points to mediocrity. Stay focused, at least for the first 10 years or more. Then you can grow.
Yeah.
But growing without deep foundations is not going to work. You're building on sand. Don't build on sand.
Very, very clear.
I really agree with Choon Fong.
Yeah.
And what I was concerned about earlier was that in China, there is no shortage really of research universities already. Some of them do very well. I mean, Tsinghua University's research funding is 12 times that of HKUST now. And so nevertheless, every university wants to be a research university and with high ranking within a short time. And produce a lot of students who are so good that they would go abroad without asking how many would return. That question include UCAS as and Tsinghua.
Let me summarize this part as I understand what you both just said. Obviously, the mission is very important. If anybody's starting a new university, you gotta have a clear idea what your mission is. You don't want to adopt the vision of some other university. So not every university should be like Harvard, for example, right? Because there are different kinds. So, and the other one is avoid mission creep, because it's very easy to sort of just expand, and you dilute your attention and so on. The other thing is building a good team. Chia-Wei, you emphasized that, both of you actually. That's very important, especially if you are leading to build a new university. And you have to understand your stakeholders. So that's a little bit politics. It's more than politics. You have to understand, why you exist. You don't exist in a vacuum. I think those are the things I get from this. Yeah. Okay. So I have asked my 4 questions. I hope we get something out of it. I think we are more or less on time, maybe running 5 minutes behind. So we have 20 minutes for Q&A from the audience. Let me remind the audience, you can ask questions in the Q&A box in Zoom. So I see a few questions there, but we can use a lot more, okay, if you can. So let me start. I see 2 there. So let me start with one. One is from Albert Yip, some of you may know, from Hong Kong. Yeah, hi, Albert, how are you? So the idea is this, he said this is really for you, Chia-Wei. So he said you build a team which is full of heart. Now, into a new university like HKUST, 31 years old, how do you build and energize the team, often with more limited resource? Not for HKUST, that's what I said. Any advice for a new and young university like HKUST as it is today? So how do you energize it, and so on?
I don't have an answer. I think so much depends on today's Hong Kong. Hong Kong has gone through, shall we say, 25 years of relative stagnation because of the through train, because Hong Kong, ruled by law is very good, but I mean, it's playing by the books. But the books were written long ago. And, free enterprise and market economy is very good, but Hong Kong exercised laissez-faire capitalism. And so there's a lot of monopoly and lots of things. The young people, the students, college students have been very unhappy. And therefore there was a lot of turmoil. One of the reasons was that, everybody knows that the real estate in Hong Kong is so high that they have no chance of ever buying a home. They live with their parents in a very, very small apartment, maybe 30%, 40% size of a typical Singapore apartment. And then also there was no emphasis on science and technology or cultural enterprises. So there was no future, career future. So these are the problems which the current president, well, Nancy Yip, very good scientist and very good administrator. She is going to become the new president in a matter of days, and she will have to face. And I don't have the wisdom or knowledge to say what she has to look for. But Hong Kong situation, time and place are different from 30 years ago.
I see there are 8 more questions. Okay, so let me run through them. So I would not ask you the same question, Choon Fong. I will pass the next question to you. This next question applies to both HKUST and KAUST, but let's say for KAUST. Now, of course, KAUST started from ground zero. Although this question came from one of the co-organizers, Dashuan. Okay. Now, so you can recruit people as you like when you are starting from scratch. However, there are many universities in Asia, especially, who are trying to move up. They exist already. So the problem is that they have a lot of baggages. So how would you advise them to handle the baggage? It's not easy to change. It's easier to start from scratch. How would you do that?
Yes, that's tough because at KAUST, in the early years, the president, the vice president, and a couple of deans, we form the search committee. We make the decision. But when it comes to an established university, it's all distributed through faculty level and search committee and so forth. The important thing is to appoint really enlightened, and how we should enlightened academics who understand that bringing in lower level talents will jeopardize. So when I did the reforms, which we did many at NUS, okay, established university, we started P&T, Promotion and Tenure Committee. We spent a lot of time with the deans to make sure that these committees are chaired by active academics, not just active, but engaged, who really are working not only for themselves, but for the university's interest, engaged people. I think appointing, and then giving enough funds. Now, it's always tough. You appoint new people, you need startup money and so forth. So somehow, you're right, the schedule. I think one of the biggest responsibility of a university president is to raise funding for endowed chairs, for faculty. And during my time, we did start, the endowment fund. It was the first in NUS. And it grew today. I don't know how much, I don't want to talk about a number, maybe Eng Chai would know. But it grew by leaps and bounds in my 8-9 years at NUS. And much of the money went to funding new research programs, new faculty members. And I think you've got to have some exciting research programs or initiatives to bring in good people. And the research committee must be aware of those things, the new initiatives. For example, I initiated what called G1010. I challenge a university, can you, over the next 10, 20 years, bring up 10 programs that be counted among the 10 best in the world? That's a very high goal. But see, something like that will catch your imagination. Do your department want to be among the best in the world? If you want, we'll give you the fund, but you got to recruit the people. But it is a tough job. Starting with, you need funding, you need alignment, you need mission alignment, and you need people who are really dedicated to the university as a growing enterprise, not just as a static organization, clubby or whatever,
Okay.
You gave me an
Chia-Wei,
opening.
quick rejoinder, because there are many interesting questions.
That Hong Kong, HKUST now has a great opportunity. It's building a second university in Guangzhou. The city
I was going to
government
ask you about that. So what do you?
The city government in Guangzhou provides land, which is almost 2.5 times the size of Hong Kong's campus, and all flat.
Now, is that mission creep?
And build the entire campus, pay for it, and also will be responsible for most of the operating costs. And at the same level as the Clearwater Bay campus in Hong Kong. The two are on equal basis, 平起平坐, but 错位互补, but not competing, rather to complement each other. The President Wei and the founding President Li Mingxuan of this Guangzhou campus know very clearly, and they can have a revolutionary idea. Lots of cross-disciplinary areas and specialties and so on in this Guangzhou campus. And all the faculty have to adhere to the same standards and same pay as in Hong Kong.
Okay.
So this is
So
a...
let me stop you there because there's some interesting questions. We're not, yeah. Okay. I won't go in the order in which they are asked. This next one I read is very interesting. It's by Chen Dongming. I don't know where he's from. Oh, here I read it to you. The current geopolitics is driving the world towards nationalism, decoupling, confrontation, and war. Which it moved. It seems our generation will hand over to our younger generation a dangerous world. Some says the problems are created by people who serve in the government, etc. But it ultimately reflects the failure of higher education. If you were appointed to lead a major university today, how would you get your students involved to reverse this dangerous trend and contribute to promoting peace and cooperation with innovative approach? How would you reshape the higher education program to address the challenge we're facing today? Very good question. So who want to take it up?
Choon Fong?
Okay, let me share this. I spent 30 years in the US. In fact, over the last, since KAUST days and down to China, we spend a lot of time building international collaboration. I don't see how the world can make progress in climate change, pandemics, and energy security, and blah, blah. Each country will, I mean, you cannot build a wall against, global warming. I think, first of all, I don't think it's correct to say that the problem lies with university. There are geopolitics involved, hostility towards education. But what we can do is through international collaborations, show that some efforts in climate change, environmental studies, benefit both countries and the world. I think we have to be more, because of this, we even have to be more proactive in engaging our international partners. We've been engaging many American universities, European universities, and even Japanese universities. China is engaging Japan and the US and Europe and even Singapore. I work with some of my Singapore colleagues on green energy. We got more, but, and it's through this that we send a message, because a lot of this is really done above us, it's the geopolitics. But we can
however, I think that in the academic world that I know, but first of all, still, even though the number has decreased, but still a huge number of Chinese students are going to America. And even though the US government seems to be discouraging research collaboration with Chinese universities, still the faculty that I have met over there, they are somewhat afraid. I'm not talking about people of Chinese background, Chinese descent. I'm talking about non-Chinese American professors. And the students that I've met still would like to see good academic cooperation. And it's not only with the US, but in Europe, in Japan. And I think that the academic community is one that can still see things clearly and knowing that the world would be able to develop in the right direction if we work together. And I think that this is quite a big responsibility for the academic world.
Yeah, there's maybe some hope there. Yeah.
But maybe I'll say something.
Yeah, please.
Really, we have to develop, not just, we have to build up connections and engagement. I engage, I go to US several times a year. I meet with, faculty members, and I serve on several committees in US universities and so forth. And we're always promoting that, yes, they are concerned, some are leery, some are cautious, and so forth. But I think when you should talk about some of this calamity, and they can see your sincerity, there's no evil or malicious intent, whatever it is, it takes a little bit more work these days. but it can be done. But we have to be now even more proactive. We cannot say, this is the way it is. And that's why KAUST, when I designed this program, I really could see the developments coming, especially in the last few years. And that's why I said, yes, some countries may not be friendly, but we know professors, at the graduate level, the decision is made by the professors. It's not made by the president or you or me. We got to know the professors. They make the decision whether to accept our graduates. And so many of KAUST students are still going to US and Europe. So you know what's the stopping point? They can't get a visa. That's where the American government or European government step in. But short of that, they still can get there, and we need to promote more. And this two-way exchange is really good because in the long run, we need a lot of collaboration. And they also open the minds. You know, young people, you got to open their minds.
Yeah, maybe I can.
All three of us, and I'm sure many in the audience who spend many years in the West, whether it's the United States or Europe, are still trying to see how we might be able to bring the academic world together.
Yeah, I think if I can add something, even take the long view. I mean, the three of us on screen in this panel, we sort of grew up in Asia, went to the US, 4 or 5 decades ago, right? And then we are in this position. We're all in Asia now. But so you have to take the long view. The world may be in this bad state now, but let's be optimistic. And you need people who understand each other. Imagine if these world leaders don't know anything about the other side, it will be an even much more dangerous world. I think that's my view. Okay, so here's the next question. Okay, it's interesting. It's coming from India, I think. The name is Sarang Nurka. He asked 2 questions, but let me just pick one. So he said, there are a lot of new university models coming up, for example, in India. So I assume he's from India, such as Ashoka University, Prasha University, this Geo University. I know, personally, I know Amity University, many. And I mentioned there are a lot of IIT that are formed. How can these new universities learn from your experience? And do you think these new models are feasible, assuming you know what they are? Okay. So to the extent you know about India University, maybe you can comment on this.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Indian context, so maybe Chia-Wei,
I'm afraid I don't, but here right now I'm in Silicon Valley. The reason is that I came here for both work and family reunion, but for more than 2 years now, I could not find a flight back to Hong Kong. Finally, in a week later, we finally got a flight to go back there. But here, sitting in Silicon Valley, I see so many really top-notch Indian scientists, engineers, and more and more are coming this way, and they also fit very well into the society here. And it makes me wonder whether with all these new universities, how many of these really top-notch Indians would go back? See, so the main question is that how do they recruit? Of course,
that's a good point.
About for Chinese universities also, maybe Choon Fong can tell me that I understand that 70% of Tsinghua graduates, the really top-notch people, students would go to America. And in the Silicon Valley, I heard that more than 20,000 Tsinghua graduates are here. And how many of them go back? Do you know?
Yeah, I think the number is increasing because of geopolitics and so forth. I think some countries are making a big mistake by restricting talents and so forth. In fact, China will grow stronger because of that. So many of the top graduates are working in Shenzhen. I've been to some of the top companies, including, Huawei, Tencent, and all this. They are thriving with smart people who are really working hard and have great innovative spirit, enterprising spirit. So more and more are returning, yes. But even if they don't return, at some point, they will, I hope, work across the, with communities, not just in China, but around the world, because I really believe that science and engineering do best when it's internationalized, because we can learn from each other so many dimensions to science and engineering that we all benefit. But you're right. But the trend is changing more and more.
If I take the prerogative of the moderator, I can try to say a few words about this issue because I visited India several times and I know many of the people there. So one is obviously India is a huge population with huge number of talents. It's well known that let's say the IIT, right, and the cream of the crop. But many of the graduates went to the US. Probably, I don't know, 80% of the graduating class will go to the US. If you go to Silicon Valley, Silicon Valley is run by Indians. You look at the head of Google, the head of Microsoft, and so on and so forth. Right? So obviously, it's really doing great. The question is whether some of them are willing to go back to India and build a new university. I think it depends on a lot of things. Family is one. Compensation is another one. You gotta. I think Hong Kong for a while has the advantage compared to mainland China. The Hong Kong university compensation at least on a par. But I think today China is probably coming up on a par.
Oh,
More, even maybe more. So for India, I'm trying to address the issue. That is a fundamental economic reason. If the compensation is 1/10, let's say, then no matter how nationalistic you cannot do it. Let me give you one good example I know about in India, and that is the Indian Business School. It was founded only in the last 2 decades, and it made use of the huge Indian diaspora, the many business schools in the US with many faculty from India. And there they are willing to go back on a part-time basis. They go back, teach a module, and so they maintain the contact. And that's one model that will work. Maybe not for University of Science and Technology, but that will work a little better. But that's a very good example. The Indian Business School is very highly ranked now and so on. Now, let me ask another question. We're coming to the last.
Important for these, whether it be India or China and so on, for these who have lived in the West for quite a while, understands the Western culture, to go back to China because they are the bridges, right? They form the bridges for building future relations between countries.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be full-time. So it depends on the situation. That's what. Yeah. So one last question. I think we only have time for one last question. It relates to this, and this is from Professor Li Xiaohang, who's from KAUST. I know him. Okay. So he's from China originally, studied in the U.S. So he asked about that most of the successful young and established universities in Asia appear to be public or predominantly driven by public resources, fewer private. While private wealth is expanding in Asia, along with the fast economic development. So could you please comment on the prospects of private university in Asia? So let me comment on this. Let me take the prerogative. I actually know of several new private universities in Asia in general. Okay, in India, I already mentioned a large number. In Japan, there's the Okinawa Institute. Dow actually, I think Dow 4 was about private university in Asia. So I think I was the moderator, and the 2 panelists, one is a former president of Keio University in Japan, which is private, and the other one is a former president of Korea University in Korea, which is also private. And really in Korea and Japan, there's a long tradition of private university. I think in China, there's a little bit less. Okay, I think in most of Asia, Taiwan is probably a good example. The private universities tend not to be the elite. They don't tend to be that. So, but recently in China, I know of several. Westlake University is one, for example, led by a very, very
really private in that sense.
Yeah, well, but it's okay. So please, okay. So many people understand this problem. So they're trying to start, but as the questioner, Professor Lee mentioned, predominantly the universities are public. So when they're public strings attached. Right, maybe it's not as autonomous and so on. Please, Chun Fong, you want to say something? Yeah.
First of all, I don't agree that public universities cannot rise to the top. Like you can't. NUS, NTU are some of the, well, I don't know, but at least if you believe in QS and Times, they are top 20, 30 in the world. They're publicly funded. So this does not mean that you're publicly funded, you're destined to be a mediocre or an average university. Not true. You got to have a government who gives you steady funding and gives the university board and president a free hand to run the university, because you cannot match university from, a cabinet minister. I mean, you can't do it. So I think it depends how the government approach higher education. So first of all, I want to dispel the notion that public can. China has many great public universities. Tsinghua, Beida, Sussex, and all right. I mean, Shanghai and a lot of places that I know. But they're also private as good. I think competition, I always believe that academic competition is good. Okay,
But
private.
I think the question that Professor Liu raised a good question. There's a lot of wealth in Asia. For example, in China, a lot of individuals can fund university. For example, I know in Hong Kong, Mr. Lee Ka-sing has funded a university in Shantou. Okay.
Well,
so that's what I read in the news. Okay, but there are many, really multi-billionaires in China alone.
But there's a new one coming up in Ningbo, called that,
for example,
they already have $5 billion US dollars or so there, and then one in Fuzhou. So, well, a group of us retired university presidents from Hong Kong and Macau, and a couple of the founding deans from UST, we have been planning to build a university of a different kind, a private one, on the mainland of China. And we had a backer who committed $3 billion US dollars to start. And important thing is to also put it into a foundation, an independent foundation, so that you have an endowment going on. And well, unfortunately, many major Chinese, that person was one of the richest people in China. Unfortunately, quite a few of these private corporations ran into difficulty in China these days, and we lost that support. And I think that public university has one advantage. Once you get going, it's general funds, right? Every year, the money has to go in there. So you have the security, so you can go and recruit good professors. A private university, unless endowment is very large, very, very large, and with a good income. Otherwise, good faculty members with their families to pull up their roots and come to you would wonder sometimes whether their security is there in the future. So
can I jump in?
That universities have advantages.
Just one remark.
Please.
There's a lot of thinking that private wealth, money can buy excellence. No. Money can buy you a great infrastructure, impressive buildings, walls. But ultimately, it's who you recruit in the leadership team and who you recruit as a faculty members to found the university. If you get it wrong, the money will not help you. So I think there's too much thinking that once I pump in a lot of money, I give you the best infrastructure in the world. That's the easy part. I think we ought to.
So maybe, okay, that's maybe a good place for us to conclude this webinar. So if I can summarize quickly, what Choon Fong just said is very important. Money is not everything. In fact, it's probably not the most important thing, but it's necessary. Without money, you cannot build anything. Okay, that's for sure. People is the most important. Building a leadership team, recruiting the right faculty, and recruiting the best students. Actually, we haven't talked about that very much. Very important. Okay, and understanding the mission. Okay, and to have a really compelling vision, because often that will actually attract the right kind of people. Right? Yes. You have people who come for the money, but you want people who really buys into the vision, because they then will be passionate about this. There's a lot of opportunities in Asia. This is, many people say it is the Asian century, and I think with the economic growth in Asia, higher education, as defined by Chia-Wei, will have to play a very important role, not just economical, intellectual, leadership. I think it's going to be hugely important. So I think for those people in the audience who are really considering, you are very wealthy, you want to start a new university, or you maybe want to be the leader of that university, or you want to join that university as a faculty member or as a student, I think we should be optimistic about this. I think in a way, there's no better time, okay, to be in Asia with this new university coming up. So with that, thank you very much for participating.
Could I have one sentence? I have one sentence conclusion? I was most fortunate. 3 years of preparation and 10 years in the position. I was so fortunate and therefore so grateful to all the faculty members and all the staff of the university. I can never forget how they devoted themselves to the institutions. The 团队精神, this teamwork, and so grateful. That's
But
all.
some of them may be online participating in this webinar. They will be very
I hope
happy
so.
to hear from you. Okay, with that said, Max, I think we'll conclude this webinar. So I think we just sign off.
Yep. Oh, and
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Okay, let's look
Goodbye.
forward to DAO 7. We'll pick a topic. Okay. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.